This episode is powered by DENmeditation.com. Though meditation is the primary focus, the bigger goal is for people to understand and love themselves, thus creating more harmony in the community at large. To find out more about Den Meditation's teacher training programs, retreats, and all things Den Meditation, go to DENmeditation.com. Hello, this is DENtalks Podcast. I'm Tal, your host and the founder of Den Meditation. I'm really excited about today's episode. We have the founder of Teledipity on today, Andrew Gabelic. If you don't know what Teledipity is, it's really fun. Go subscribe now. It is a numerology website that sends you forecasts every single month. And so, look, I realized in all this time, we'd actually never had someone on about numerology. So yes, of course, we talk about numerology in the most basic sense, so you get an understanding of what it is, but we go pretty deep in. I mean, I love that he talks about how to use numerology and also how not to. He's very big on trust your gut first and see how numerology takes you deeper into understanding who you are. And so from that conversation, we go a lot deeper into how he used numerology to go deeper into who he is. So if you already know him and want to know more about him, this is a great episode. We also get into ideas of, where does the numerology come from in the sense of what names do you use if you have multiple names? What is the power of the name? How do you choose a name? He is so fascinating. He's so interesting. He's really honest. He's very humble. He also has a very fun personal practice. The personal practices this year have been interesting. I love it. So he has a very fun personal practice that I challenge us all to do at least once if you don't bring it into your daily life. So stay tuned for that. I realized, and then we'll jump into it, that in all the episodes we've done for this podcast, we've never done one on numerology, which is crazy if you think about what DENtalks is about and what the Den's about. So I'm so excited you're here. So I start every podcast with the same two questions for everyone. And I want you to pick a word that describes you 5 years ago and a word that describes you today. Maybe it's the same word, maybe it's different. We like to really kind of annoy you right off the bat.
Yeah, it's not annoying. There's so much to filter it in one word. I think 5 years ago, blind.
Ooh.
And today, clear.
I feel like that's in a song somewhere. It's like the good lyrics of a song. Let's talk about that for a second. So where were you 5 years ago? Where were you in your life that felt blind?
It was the early days of my company. My company's 7 years old, so that would have been entering into the second year. I was doing it all alone.
Oof.
And I love numerology, and I knew the basics, which was I want to build a numerology website that's different from what's out there, that does things in a cool, unique way that doesn't exist right now. But I was blind to all the subconscious internal motivations and what was really driving me and why I believed that was the only thing that mattered, the thing that overtook my entire life, the thing that I was focused on even on evenings and weekends, and the thing that kind of like separated me for my life for so many years. So I was doing it, but it was coming from an obsessive, hungry place that I didn't know to really recognize or understand why it was that way. And I've been releasing that over the past 3 years, and I look back at those memories. I don't know if you've been through this, but it's like that was another person. That was not me. It's kind of like a movie. I remember the things that person was thinking and the things that he believed, but I've gone through such an internal death since then, and I'm doing my work from such a different angle that I'm now clear on why I do what I do, what it is and what it isn't, and what matters and what doesn't, in a way that makes me do my work differently. So it was my whole relationship with my professional life, I think, has been the big thing for me. And what's
I
changed.
love this. And then we're going to get specifically into numerology, but I
Mm-hmm.
want to talk about this for a little bit because
Mm-hmm.
I think especially with people who listen to this podcast, transformation and deaths
Mm-hmm.
and leaving a different part of you behind is so relevant. And I think, I love how you described it. You're like, that wasn't me. But the fascinating thing was, it was like,
Yeah.
you're like, that fucking was me.
Yeah.
And then it's not like this part of you now didn't exist back then. It was there. It just wasn't tapped into at all, probably, or even aware that this part of you, which I find it's what I love about what we do and talk about this idea of this depth of who we are to an extent that
Yeah.
most of the time we're not seeing parts of ourselves clearly. So, talk a little bit about you said you started doing the work and you've had this death. What helped you or what spurred this realization that you were only kind of clinging to the small part of you?
Um. Of course, it started with COVID. At the very early
COVID is
stages of
the big transformer. I
COVID.
love it.
um. I To summarize, after almost, I guess it was 3.5, 4 years of only thinking about building this, putting this out there, scaling it, and not allowing any other thoughts in, like a month before COVID, the I guess the platform was growing, but the financial balance was not there. And when COVID happened, it kind of like the finances took care of themselves. It was just the world changed, the demand in my market changed, and suddenly that was no longer a problem. It was like overnight.
Like that.
But once I stopped worrying about that, and then had was dealing with maybe my own traumas being triggered because at the time I was a hypochondriac and was scared of all kinds of diseases linked to my childhood, like being in a lot of hospitals and accidents, and just the relationship with the idea of being sick, being one of the first like 300 or 400 people that got
Mm.
the original virus in my city, and it was like the first month of the
Whoa.
virus. So like, yeah, I mean, I clearly attracted it. But I I we didn't know what it was. I thought I was dying. It really
Mm.
wrecked my lungs. I couldn't breathe, and that's when I was like, okay, now the money's fixed. But if this is if this is how the story ends,
And by story ends, meaning you felt like you could die.
exactly.
Okay.
Um, uh, and I know that sounds ridiculous now, but
No,
at the
you're not
time,
alone.
it was believable. It was a believable thing, and especially whatever.
No, say it, especially.
I have asthma, so my lungs really did not react well to having the virus. I really had struggled breathing for months.
It's
But
terrifying.
it wasn't the near death experience. It was the things that got triggered after, like um, where do these fears come from? What experiences did I go through? Like I don't know if it's necessary to go in through into my whole kind of like past or trauma background, but to summarize, um, I just started realizing that I had been driven by fears, insecurities, kind of like an automatic runaway chase mode. I need to get somewhere else because the present isn't safe for me kind of program in my mind. And that even though my business was a reflection of my passions and the things I love to do and the things I care about, it was still kind of like my mechanism of escaping the present by thinking of a better future. And
Mhm.
this thing that I believed my whole life, which was this sucks. The future is better. Let me go build it so that one day I can get there. But that's remains, you know. So I just saw that for the first time, and it was the chain reaction from being sick and then everything that happened after that helped me see that for the first time. So you think that you care about something and are passionate about what you do, and it doesn't stop being true while and I mean, I'm not going to project myself to everybody else, but in my experience, I just once again, in another way, uh, came face to face with my own self deceptions and my own ways of justifying things and hiding the true motivations and not seeing them while thinking I was fine. So I guess I just went in to work on all that, and today I think the biggest thing I've decided, apart from kind of like reorganizing that whole structure of my identity, is that
Just that.
I'm not gonna ever allow myself to think that I'm done evolving or growing, or that
Oh, okay.
I've figured out what I who I am, because I'm always on the lookout for more self deceptions that could be out there, and I think I
Oh,
protect myself from that feeling that, like, okay, now this is it. Now I have a
to,
handle on everything, because
oh, and they're
I think that's the
constant.
most dangerous place. Yeah.
Yes, agreed. And I
Yeah.
think it's so
Yeah.
interesting that so much of what your website does, people get these beautiful messages, especially every month, and you can go on, which really helps people go into the depths of who they are, is where you were actually struggling doing.
Yeah.
So often we
Yeah.
do that to ourselves.
Yeah. No, I think I think it's even in the numerology framework, your life mission is the thing you struggle with, that you came to deal with yourself and then share it with others. That's what a life mission is. It's not something you're naturally good at. It's not something you're born with.
Oh,
Amazing. It's the thing you came to work on as a soul. And then when you get to some level, start helping others with.
well, that makes
So,
sense because mine, and I wrote it down. I was like, oh, that's so funny because what was it? Yes, mine it says the constructive application of self-care. I think it's part of my
mhm,
being a transformational leader. And I started laughing. I'm
mhm.
like, that is one of my biggest challenges. Like, even though it's like, this is what you're here to do, I'm like, oh God, you can tell I'm working on it because that is one of my biggest challenges. So it's funny you said
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
So what things did you do? Because you keep saying, so then I started doing things to shift it. Like, what helped you shift it? Because I feel like that's, where people get stuck. People are like, okay, I have the awareness now, but
Mhm.
like, what do I do next?
Uh, I took about a year and a half off from my company, where I was working about 2 to 3 hours a day, and then not like I just decided it's going to be like it's I'm gonna do the least possible so it stays alive, and then just take a vacation from it, a year and a half long vacation. So throughout 2021, I was barely
Wow.
working, just like an hour or two a day, and I was very anathema to how I did things before, and that was just maybe a little rule, but um, how I used that time was there was a lot of internal, just maybe restructuring. If I were to summarize it, I had to abandon the dream in my head, come to a place where I was at peace with having a different kind of life and imagining other kinds of futures where I could maybe
Mm.
reduce the importance I was placing on it and see my life outside of it. And then after I could achieve that, and that wasn't immediate, return to it to figure out what I still cared about and what I didn't care about anymore after just going through the exercise of imagining a different life. And a lot of things fell off and some things stayed. And then
I mean, that's huge.
yeah, yeah. I think, I mean, I would summarize it as saying that uh, I changed from thinking that my dream would make me happy to figuring out my happiness outside of the dream, and then just seeing the dream as an experience that I'm curious about, interested in, not something that's going to change either my identity or my assessment of my own life either way. And that's the end point. But
Well, it's like two
yeah.
things keep coming to mind is you were
Hmm.
willing to separate yourself from the identity you were so
Hmm.
wrapped up in, which is
Hmm.
really, really, really hard for most people to do. And it's like when
Hmm.
you do that and you get the freedom to then really see what it's about, that's huge. So that's
Hmm.
amazing. And everything you keep talking about, it's funny. It's like, when people talk about manifestation and creating, it's like the main rules. It's like if you're creating out of a place of like need, want, desperation, forcing it, you can wish it all you want. I always tell people, like, I'm not a big mood board person, but like I
Mhm.
get it. It works for some people, but like you can mood board all you want, you can journal all you want, you can do as many fire ceremonies as you want, but if it's coming from, lack, and
Yeah.
if it's coming from that place of like holding onto it so tightly,
Yeah.
it doesn't happen because you create whatever you're thinking. So you're still creating that lack. You're still creating that simultaneously. They're canceling itself out. So it's interesting that
Yeah.
you kind
I
of
think yeah.
yeah,
I
go
think
ahead.
it's not uh I don't think it's the universe's job to deliver what you're asking for. I think it's the universe's
Mm,
job to help you balance what's not yet balanced in your, let's say, vibration or beliefs. So if you're asking for something, thinking that it's going to change you or improve you or address a hole that you have or make you happy automatically or whatever, that's not balance. That's giving something more power than it really has. So if you ask for the universe for something from that place, the the universe's job is to help you figure out that that's not a good idea, not to just give it to you. So I think that it's not that I don't believe in some of the law of attraction's concepts
hmm
that are more abstract. I think that uh, we misunderstand it in that way because we're not here to get everything we want. We are here to balance what's not
I
balanced in
love.
our vibrational imprint, and then the universe responds to that. So if you give uh, a desire or a manifestation too much importance, like this is the thing that's going to change X, you might get it, but you'll get it in a way that will teach you that that's not really
Right. It might not be so
true.
fun.
So it's not gonna fit the expectations, or the universe will help you by not delivering it, so you can figure that out too. But I think it's more about your personal evolution than just like hacking the laws of the universe so you can just get whatever. Because I don't think that's the purpose.
I mean, I couldn't agree more. I feel like it is, how do you find the balance? And like you
Mhm.
said, until you started to understand yourself and the happiness within yourself and not putting it out into the dream or putting it out
Mhm.
into the success of the business or into it
Mhm.
looking a certain way, is when you started achieving it. Because it was like that was what was missing. You were missing that hole. So it's like you
Yeah.
had to balance that part of you until you kind of can expand. I love that. So talk to me, because you mentioned like there was you had a lot of fear going into
Mhm.
COVID with, and you're hypochondriac. Were
Mhm.
you, is that, do you feel like those are traits you were born with, or do you feel like that's something you learned from like being a child? Like, was it environmental? Like, what was that for you? Because you mentioned you were sick a lot.
Uh, okay. I have an answer, but I want to preface my answer by saying because
I love
I'm
anytime you have to
like,
do that.
well, I just so I like numerology gives me a lot of ambiguous frameworks for how some of this stuff works, but
Okay.
A, that's my channeling my intuition around it. B, not numerology, not astrology, not anything can give you the whole version of the truth. And C, I don't think any human can tap into the whole version of the truth, just pieces. So I don't want, when I talk about this stuff, I don't want to sound like I get how everything works, because I don't. And I
I
also, my
appreciate
own
that.
personal relationship with those frameworks is ambiguous. Like I kind of can explain them, but I also don't want to over explain them,
Mhm.
because I know that I don't know. It doesn't make sense to me. Like, I know that I can't understand them fully. So I think that the experiences you get as a child are echoes of where your vibration was when you first arrived. So to say, was I born a hypochondriac or did my childhood experiences make me one? I think those are one and the same. The soul enters
Mhm.
this physical plane and
Mhm.
attracts the things that it's imbalanced in. So it would attract those experiences that scare it because it was already imbalanced in that side of it. And I don't know that it's sickness necessarily, but maybe I don't know, some kind of fear of death or fear of your own body or something, or anxiety around certain things. I think I came with that, and I think that's why my childhood experiences reflect that. Um, that would be my answer.
I think that's a great answer. What was, if when you look back on your childhood, what was like one of, for you, the one that sticks out the most that you're like, oi,
asthma attacks and not being able to breathe.
Well, that's
Yeah,
terrifying.
yeah.
How's your asthma now?
It's does I don't have I never had attacks as an adult. I re-experienced it with COVID. I had not experienced it since I was maybe like 5 or 6, and not since. So it was kind of like a regression flashback kind of thing because it, yeah.
But that's actually even more fascinating that because I do feel like sometimes those are the things that then bring up, oh,
Mm-hmm,
fuck, like that's the pattern that I have to
mm-hmm,
work on. That's the
mm-hmm,
vibration that I need to rebalance. That you had to be in that fearful place of re-experiencing what it was like that you experienced so much as a child.
mm-hmm.
And since COVID, how has it been? Like I know it took you a little bit, but how have you been the past couple of
Um,
years?
there was a lot of reprocessing of memories, whether be they sickness or other linked ones, through EMDR, which is a very
Mm.
specific PTSD therapy for a couple of years, and it changed my life because yeah, a lot of those habits have been released, and I don't always realize it. Just living my life, but the difference is massive, and that specific treatment really helped me, and yeah, so I feel a lot better about that and all the other stuff.
When did numerology come into your life? So you kind of like you said you had a
Yeah.
lot of fear as a kid. You went through some of these
Uh,
traumas. Like when did you start using it for yourself or start discovering it?
uh, th- there's there's kind of two seeds. The first is very young. I had a very strong bond with my grandmother. She was very spiritual, but not religious. She's a woman of 1950s Mexico, and she was not Catholic, but
Mm.
she had crystals. She was all about astrology and all about all this stuff. And this was her passion, and I really loved her. So I think that curiosity came from just my love for her. I would ask about signs and her chart and all that stuff when I was a kid, and that's maybe the seed. And then shortly after she died, in my early 20s, in graduating college in the middle of the Great Recession, struggling with money, not finding a job, I end up roaming horoscope sites to figure out the date where I would get a job or like the crisis would stop. And I found a numerology site, and I just
How
developed a
good
different.
how good at astrology were you that like you could like derive that information?
I mean, I didn't know either astrology or numerology. I just thought it could give me that,
You're like,
and I
I'm just
think
looking for
that's.
anything.
I know. Well, I'm pretty sure that's the motivation most people have when they enter when they read a horoscope. It's like when does the shit stop? What's the date?
Yes. Yeah, when does
Um,
it stop and when does the good stuff start?
exactly, exactly. But I found a numerology website, and I found a different curiosity about numerology than astrology. Not because I'm a critic or astrology, or don't believe in it, just because the things numerology was saying were more precise, more specific, more philosophical, more. There was just something about it that felt eerie, and I just developed this curiosity slash obsession. I have to understand how this works, so I started collecting books, some used, some new, some from the 70s, some from the 1920s, and then read for years and years and years. I think maybe 5 or 6 years later, decided, okay, now I want to do my own website, and then I started. So it was,
So in all
I
those
was,
books that you're reading, how
yeah,
often were you doing like what do you call it a chart? Like what do you call it? In astrology you'd call it a chart. What do you call it if you're reading someone's numerology?
it's a chart or a map. I was doing my own. I was doing celebrities. I was doing people from history that I know their life story and I admire. I was doing my friends, my family, people I knew. I had a little app where I could calculate anybody because you don't need the time of birth with numerology. So in the workplace, I would just figure out their middle names, put in my app, see their chart, and then just observe um, their lives, their personalities, our relationship. And there was a lot of not just the book learning, but just the observation. And that was, I think I started the numerology obsession at 22, and the site was launched at 27. So it was a lot of years of just observing and taking either real notes or mental notes.
But like so what was the progression from 22 to 27? What were you doing? Did you get a job?
Yeah.
Like I mean
Yeah.
who who were you? Like who was that
uh,
masked man?
so I I went I wanted to I went to film school. I wanted to be a screenwriter. Could not get one of those jobs. Was invited back to my student job on campus as the manager, which was telephone fundraising office where students ask alumni for money.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't want that job, but I took it, and it ended up being one of the greatest jobs of my life because what I was actually doing was learning about technology because I thought I was a writer and I didn't think I could understand it, and I discovered that I was really good at it and loved just being creative with technology, and B, the motivating, training, interacting with young people, and making them love a really shitty job and making them see it as the most awesome thing that could actually help them with their futures, and then seeing how me reframing an experience like that and presenting it in such an enthusiastic way could actually make a difference, not just in the money that we raise, but in how those kids became adults and changed. And yeah, I loved it. I loved it, and I loved giving speeches and talking to students, and it was the happiest year of my life. Then
Mm.
they outsourced the call center, so they kept me on, but I didn't have that job anymore. And for a year, they kept paying me, but I wasn't really doing much. And then I just moved to another job on campus with the football team, and did a lot of websites, databases for fundraising of all different kinds, and then turn that into just kind of like this technology for nonprofits niche 2 jobs after until I started the website. So it was
God, isn't
just,
it so
yeah,
interesting how you gain your skill set?
yeah, yeah.
And
Yeah, I think, I don't know. I think I'm a big believer that even the parts of your career that feel like detours, they're an ingredient in the big thing that
I totally agree
always
with
comes
that.
back later. And it's weird how that happens. Turns out all of them were perfect and they were fitting the mold perfect. Yeah.
So so that 22 to 27 before you launched, you're getting really good at numerology. What
Yeah.
did you learn about your numerology for you that helped you during that time?
Did I learn about my numerology from me? Um, Embracing parts of my personality that had been criticized before and that I was ashamed of, but are actually strengths, but I didn't see them as such, and they were in the chart. So I just started saying like, yeah, I am that way, and that's a good thing. And f everybody who said otherwise. So that was a big piece. Second, being more aware of things, the theme of life that I struggle with, which is change and being too enamored with future and adventure that takes me out of the present, is straight from my chart and was kind of the thing that I really understood after COVID. And I guess another piece of it is just understanding people's differences and how um, to embrace and honor different personality types, even when they're not compatible with you, instead of judging or wanting people to be more like you. I think when you start seeing that imprint in other people and how, well, this is what they're really good at, this is what they're not good at, that makes sense. And it makes sense why we usually have conflict in these areas, but we usually connect really well in these areas. Just also learning to see other people outside of my own misconceptions or my own filter. Um,
And that's your whole
I think
site. I
that,
mean, you
yeah,
help people
hope
see themselves.
I yeah, I hope I do. I don't I don't believe it to be like law or like this is what the universe says about you. I think it's a good starting point to figure out if that makes sense or not, and maybe help you ask yourself questions that you wouldn't have asked yourself before. So I think it is kind of like a reflection inducer. Like, have you thought about this? Have you thought about that? Have you thought about the master plan? Have you thought about your strengths? Have you thought about your weaknesses? Have you thought about this month? Have you thought about another angle for this problem you're facing? Just different angles to what's going on in your life. So that's what I see Teledipity's role as being. And even though numerology is eerily accurate, I don't want to present it as this is the algorithm that explains the whole universe because A, I don't believe that it's that, and B, I also think that spirituality is self-driven, so I don't want to lead anybody's spiritual uh, introspection. I want to provide alternative viewpoints to enrich it. So I think I think that's how I would describe my philosophy. So I don't want to present numerology as like this is the thing or
And
the thing that
I
will
really,
explain everything.
you can tell you're like that in general with like which I appreciate even with yourself. You're like, I feel like this is how I feel about what happened in the past, but I don't want to say no because we don't truly ever know anything. And I think it sounds like what you really learned in COVID is not holding on too tight and knowing that really anything can happen.
Yeah.
Let's do some nuts and bolts of numerology just for a
Mm-hmm.
second. So anyone
Mm-hmm.
listening who might not. So you mentioned that you're like, it's eerily accurate. You felt like when you were kind of looking at astrology, we'll talk about a little bit the differences of astrology and numerology. I know they're obvious, but I do feel like when people are getting some of these forecasts, it's like, oh my God, a lot of the similar themes kind of come up.
So the human history is uh, full of these divine languages that come from all different civilizations and sources. They're not all the same. The thing that they share in common is that um, they believe in a fundamental perfection of the universe, whereby your place, time of birth, name, they have messages because they're coming from whatever algorithm is driving it all. So they develop languages or systems to try to gain access to those insights through observation. So for thousands of years, somebody observed Jupiter when it comes into this position or whatever. These things tend to happen, and they start writing it down and developing a whole approach to it. Some of it maybe comes from channeling, some of it from observation, and then generations add to it and add to it and add to it, and that's how we get astrology. Numerology is the same thing. They're not actually linked because they maybe evolved in parallel, but they're cousins in the sense that they look at your birth date and your name and try to get insights about who you are, what you are here to do, and episodes and cycles in your life that are important, that are turning points, that mark a transformation in X, Y, or Z area, and just um, signposts for your life at every moment. So that's what they have in common. The differences are is that astrology looks at planets and their positions. Numerology looks at numbers and their presence in your life. Your birth date is a collection of digits. Your full name, as it was recorded at birth, is all digits because each letter has a position in the alphabet. And there's formulas you apply to that full name at birth that, from the perspective of numerology, are a reflection of your soul contract. That was not an accident. That somebody said, this is this person's full name and wrote it down somewhere after you were born. That's the reflection of your soul contract. So the name as it was recorded on your birth certificate holds all that information. Even if you change a letter, Mary, whatever else, that name has your chart in it. And there's a bunch of formulas that you apply to both of those and combine them, and you get a chart that is separated into two: how you arrived and what you came here to do. So one is kind of like the snapshot of how this soul came into this life. The other is kind of like a map of the experiences that were kind of like organized for it, not in a predestined way, but kind of like a sequence um, of vibrations or types of events to assist that soul in its chosen evolution for this lifetime.
Hello, you guys. Sorry for the interruption. But again, your friendly reminder that we have so many certifications and courses for you at denmeditation.com, all live and virtual, so you can do them from anywhere. If you've been certified in Reiki Level 1 and you're interested in 2, it starts March 25th. So go check that out. We have psychic mediumship coming out. And also, I teach an amazing course called Journey Around the Medicine Wheel. That is in the fall in October. So if you want to get in there early, please join me for that. That is a 12-week course, really transformative. All of this stuff is amazing. We have all of it for you. Again, if you're a Reiki level 1er and want to go to 2, check that out for this weekend. Get on it, and we will see you all soon. Talk about, well, I have 2 questions.
Mm-hmm.
So for instance, like selfishly, so my daughter was adopted,
Mm-hmm.
and we knew the name we were getting her from birth. We knew it was already decided. And so we knew the name. I mean, we were choosing between a couple, but we pretty much knew the name we were going to give her.
Mm-hmm.
The bio mom wanted to there are like certain family names she wanted to hold on to. And so she was like, well, there's two birth certificates anyway. There's the one when she first comes in, and then you guys immediately change it. So
Mm-hmm.
she gave her a name,
Mm-hmm.
which she called her our name right from the beginning. She never actually ever referred to her. So even though there was like, 5 days of we were all still together.
Mm-hmm.
So that's interesting to me because in my mind, she ever never was ever even identified. That was more for the bio mom's, what's the word? Her emotional need. And
Mm-hmm.
even though, like I said, she asked us, she's like, so what name did you guys decide? And we told her. So she was always this other name. So which one would you go by?
These specific cases where there's an adoption and the birth certificate changed really quickly, I
Hmm.
see them as a case. Like if somebody asks about like, but I just got married and changed my name, that's more clear to me. It's the birth name. Don't
Yeah.
even like that. Like don't worry, you don't have to use the name, but that's where your soul contract comes from. Here though, there is nuance in the sense that um, I guess what's happening behind the scenes is that no parent chooses the name of their child by accident because they're channeling it, receiving it, and that's the name.
Mm.
What that chart is. So if we
And I did
take
actually.
biology out of it, you are the parent from
Hmm.
not just the literal level, but from the spiritual level, because regardless of who conceived the child, spiritually, that soul chose you as a mother.
Hmm.
So I would say you would look at both charts and read about them. You might see echoes in both, but you would be able to tell really quickly, no, it's this one. And it's
Oh, that's
probably the
interesting.
one you chose. But I think in those cases, it's useful to look at both because when you
That's a good
change
idea.
your name, it does have a meaning. You don't change your personality immediately. You don't change your soul contract, but you are at a spiritual level saying like, I'm choosing a new goal. Like these are sides part of my personality that I want to develop, change, work
So
on,
true.
and that's kind of like where you're aiming towards. And because the name at birth is just a snapshot, it changes throughout your life. It maybe is signifying that you are so far from where you came that you are kind of like adjusting that in the middle. So
That's so
those name
interesting because I have no
changes.
desire to change my name ever.
Mhm, mhm.
I don't even love my name, but I'm like, it's me. That's how
Yeah,
I always feel. I'm like, it's me.
and some people feel the opposite. Some people really
Yeah.
feel they need to change it. But what I uh, what I say in those cases, like you're not changing your soul contract. You're giving yourself a new destination. So it's not like I want to change my name. I'm a different person, but you are kind of like moving the goalpost to somewhere else,
Mm.
and that has meaning too. But you would still look at the birth chart to see where
I
you
find that
came from
that's
and
so
where you probably still
fascinating.
are in a way. Yeah.
That's fascinating. I'm gonna have to do that. I have to, by the way, I don't even fully remember. I know I have it written down somewhere, but I'm gonna do
Mhm.
that because I think that's gonna be really interesting to see. And that's funny that you say channel because it is so true. The name I always thought I would name a baby girl shifted when she became a reality. And not when she was born, but when we knew it was happening, all of a
Mhm.
sudden, like different versions of that name came in, the nickname came in right away. So that's fun. And she is clearly her name as everyone grows to be usually for a while.
Yeah. It sounds
Oh,
like
that's
the second birth certificate is the correct one for her. Yes.
Oh, I have to do hers.
Yeah.
I'm excited. So then talk also about how you do these amazing forecasts about,
Mhm.
based on this numerology. So is it also like the numbers carry energy? And then when you're kind of in different dates and different times, those two carry energy and it's like the blend of how they all bounce off each other?
Yeah. I mean,
I'm sure I'm simplifying it.
if people are listening, I'm going to use some visual aid.
Oh, good.
But I'll try to describe it. So there's the internal vibration, which is the person, and then there's the external vibration, which is the time in your life that you are in. It's still calculated from your digits, but it's different. So you can be a two, which is reflective of a very patient, intuitive, reserved person that likes harmony and stability and peace. And entering a 5 year, which is the opposite of that, is instability, in the changes, surprises, happy accidents, just a really intense movement. And it's the season in your life. It's not the vibration that you vibe with, but you get it for this period in order to advance forward. So um, there's the internal vibration, the external vibration. The external vibration is shifting. It depends on who you are, whether you're going to enjoy that season or find it stressful. because it's a compatibility thing, just like the compatibility between two people. Of course, you can always find the good side of it, and become an adaptable person that finds the good in every season. But when we're talking about forecasting numerology, we're talking about the external vibration that will shift based on where you are in that map, the three main cycles, the pinnacles, the 9-year cycles, and you could drill down to the vibration of the day, the vibration of the week, the vibration of the month, the vibration of the year. And what my site does is give you that interpretation for where you stand today.
Talk about the 9-year cycle a little bit so people understand that.
So the algorithm beneath numerology is this spectrum of 9 vibrations that make up the whole balanced human life. So the digits are 1 through 9, obviously, and that's why the mathematical system is based on it. And each number represents one side of life, one vibration. 1 is independence, self-sufficiency. 2 is patience, harmony, intuition. 3 is creativity, imagination, living the moment, joy. 4 is systems, order, planning, having a goal, executing it. 5 is flexibility, adaptability, etc., etc. So in the numerology algorithm, 5. In the numerology algorithm, it's you kind of go through this sequence over and over again every 9 years, depending on your birth date. I could be in a 5-year, you could be in a 2-year, but it's kind of like every year has its focus, and you are looking at that specific lane as it relates to the themes of your life. So if the theme in your life is leadership, independence, and self-sufficiency, and you're in a cycle that's looking at the patience of those, the patience, intuition, harmony angle of those lessons, and then you're in a 3-year, then the combination gives you kind of like an interpretation for what's going on right now. So it's, I don't know if that made any sense to the person listening, but it's just a fractal of sequences of 9 days, 9 months, 9 years, 9 cycles of 9 years, 9 cycles of 9 cycles of 9 years, and it just goes on forever. And it's us advancing through the sequence of 9 main vibrations in life with our own focus on it. And
so basically, just to like,
mm-hmm.
you are born as a either 1 through 9. That's like just a broad spectrum number that you're given.
Mm-hmm.
You're 5.
Mm-hmm.
And then each year, depending on where you are, you're going into a different year that has its own number identity.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so therefore it creates a different number cycle of what you're going through.
Kind of.
There's I wish you guys could see his face for that. That was the best part.
I just so yes, it's a theme for your life, one main vibration, split into 3 main cycles: youth, maturity, advanced stage. Each have their own lane in that main. So you could have a 1 life cycle with a 7 youth. So you're looking at the intersection between the 1 and the 7 in every experience you had before, around 27 to 34, depending on your specific number. And then each one of those bigger cycles are divided into cycles of 9 years, where think of it like a video game. Mm-hmm. So the universe is trying to teach you this main thing, split into 3 semesters, and each of those semesters has different classes. Done. And I love that. Numerology helps you look at those intersections, and that's where you get some insights about what's going on in your life from that angle.
Is there, and I know the answer is we learn from every, year and cycle we're in, and everything's important to our evolution. I get that. But is there like when you're like, I'm in a this year, like, is there any version of a year that's kind of either like, yes, that's either a relieving year or it's a year of abundance, or, is there any, do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah. I mean, there are years that are harder than others from the human perspective. From the spiritual perspective, they're all awesome, because they're all helping us grow. But it is totally okay to say, I'm not a fan of 2 years, which is what I would say. 2 years are not my cup of tea because they're not compatible with me. But I still know when I'm going into one, and then make the best of it. I think the beautiful thing that this algorithm gives me, and I try to put it into the app, is that it teaches you that when we say balance, like I want to live a balanced life, instead of trying to put it all in at 24 hours, you look at the whole. Like
Hmm.
you can have a really busy year. And that doesn't mean that you don't have a balanced life, because then you balance it with a very restful year on the other side of it. So you don't have to do everything in a day. You meditate, you read, you go to the gym, you work on your company, you go on a romantic date, you play with your dog and try to put it all in 24 hours, or if not, you don't have a balanced life. And there's seasons for everything. And there's busier weeks, more restful weeks. There's weeks for creativity. There's weeks for connecting with your loved ones. There's weeks for learning. There's weeks for doing nothing and binging Netflix. And it's all there. And usually when you see which one you're in, it makes perfect sense. But it also helps you realize that I can put everything aside and just focus on this, because if this time of my life feels like slower or there's not a lot happening, I know that there's a lot of excitement next year. So I don't have to have anxiety around that and just focus on this. So there's a
I
lot
love
about
that.
numerology that uh, you curiously come into it to find out about the future, but what it's really doing is help you focus on the present and enjoy the present.
And allowing you to just be in it because
Uh,
it's like you said, it's showing you where the balance all lies.
yeah.
So it takes away a little bit of kind of what you were going through originally
Hmm.
in your business of like having to accomplish it all right here, right now.
Hmm.
That's awesome. Tell me some things when you look back at your 2 years that stick out for you.
So the theme of a 2 year is to stop what you're doing. And the universe really makes sure of that. You come in with a lot of plans, and it's like, through whatever means, it's just a pause. And when you try to act on something that you're looking for, it doesn't have to be professional. Maybe you're trying to improve your social life. Maybe you're trying to find a partner. Maybe you're trying to conceive a child. It makes that process like a swamp. It's very slow and very like you have to be really, really patient. And what it's actually helping you do underneath is make sure that you are clear on why you are looking for what you're looking for, and also learn how to like look elsewhere into your life and not be so tunnel vision on that, and maybe start channeling some intuitions about how your plan may be wrong and how it should change, and what the real direction is, because what you came in with was kind of right but also kind of wrong, and the 2 year helps you clean that a lot by inaction and by a lot of either waiting or just finding roadblocks to whatever it is that you're trying to find. And it's not always professional, but that's the behavior of a 2 year. So for a person that is very used to having objectives and meeting them, or always doing what they say they're going to do, or really finding their identity in action and ticking the boxes off of the to-do list and feeling like they're getting somewhere, a 2 feels like torture because you don't get to do that. So yeah,
So when was your last 2 year?
2020.
That was gonna ask you if
Yeah.
those because that sounds like it. Because it
Thank you.
does. It sounds when you describe it, it sounds like a very forced
Hmm.
time of transformation, but not transformation in the like, "Oh, it's all changing." Transformation in like that deep
Hmm.
seated, like you have to go underneath it to see what it
Yeah.
might be and then take the time to like oh,
Yeah.
it's brutal, but
Yeah.
always as I always
Yeah.
teach people, like, take the signal of like, "Oh, yes, this is all going to something
Yeah.
very amazing once I do the work."
And the 2 is not really about changing your whole identity. It's not like the internal death year. The internal death year is a 9 year. The 2 is about your identity specifically in relation to the things you desire or are chasing. Your
Mm,
your
your attachments.
dreams. Yeah. Not necessarily your whole being. It's that specific kind of like what you're in law of attraction terms, what you're trying to manifest.
Well, then talk about that in relation to a 9-year.
A 9 year is the end of a cycle. It's the end of, if your life was a Netflix show, it's a season finale.
Oh,
So the storylines close, and some characters depart. Some new characters arrive, but they're going to be more important next season. But you start meeting them. You're entering the climax of what you were really dealing at a spiritual level for all those 9 years. See how, like, if you kind of like learned, if you understand them, if you've moved past them, so that you can move on into the next season that has completely different themes and probably takes place in a new location. There's probably a change in career sometimes, and this is not a specific prediction for anybody who's listening. It's just the kinds of things that happen in a 9 year. There can be divorces. There can be uh, changes in your social setting. Like, it's just whether you were planning to or not. Entering a 9 year means you're about to close out this chapter of your life and start something completely different. That doesn't always mean that you leave everything and start anew, but you leave a lot. You say goodbye to a lot, specifically the things that are expired and don't belong there anymore. And really the objective is to let go and to say goodbye and to open up space, kind of like decluttering your home and taking out all the shit in your closet that you haven't been using for a while by a spiritual level.
now if you were aware of your cycles and aware of your
Mm-hmm.
years, and you are spiritually doing the work, like you're actually attuned to what it's telling you, you're doing the lessons, which most of us don't 100% do, but let's pretend
Mm-hmm.
that you're 100% like understanding, oh, this is the time of deep transformation, this is the time of letting go, this is the time of
Mm-hmm.
expansion, whatever. By the time you get to a 9 year, and like you said, something shifts, something changes, like it doesn't look the same, does that make it then easier in some ways? I guess my point is, if you're reluctant
Yes.
to spiritually flow with it, does it
Yeah.
do those 9 years feel more shocking than if you've kind of been really
Yes.
working with the depths of your
Yes.
spirituality?
Depending on what you're putting out, you get either the nice or the not so nice version of the vibration itself, because each
Right.
vibration has a spectrum, from like the complicated to the very nice, and it's always going to match what you're putting out, because the purpose of the universe is to help you achieve balance, to help you stand in the center of each vibrational spectrum. So yes, if you've been ignoring the theme of your 9 year cycle throughout the the 8 years that came before it, and refuse to change and refuse to let go, and have not really advanced on what uh, the opportunities that the universe was giving you throughout that time, the 9 will be an especially difficult year. But that does not mean that you still don't that's a punishment, A, or B, that you don't have the opportunity to turn it around, because you always do. You can
Mm.
always there's no deadline to complete the tests that the universe is giving you. So if you procrastinate and you leave them all to the very last year, you can still do them and ace them all, and then advance. So there's no nobody should feel less than or I don't know, weak or inadequate for having a rough 9 year, because A, we all go through them, and B,
Hmm.
that's only evidence of the universe trying to help you move on.
Move along.
Yeah.
So you mentioned earlier, which I loved, you were saying, you can, when you have a better idea, you were saying you kind of learned it through your own numerology of
Hmm.
seeing people for their full selves. So
Hmm.
understanding like, oh, this is harder for them. So I get why this
Hmm.
might be an area we kind of butt heads, or this is their strengths. And I've not been, acknowledging that strength. Has this really helped you with like synastry? Has it really helped you with, friendships or business relationships? Do you use it practically in a way of just, understanding people that allows you, does it change your relationship with people?
Hmm. It's hard to say because I've been doing it for so long. I don't necessarily have like moments where I'm too analytical about the people in my life from a numerology perspective. I definitely see all those charts as soon as I can see them. But once I get the snapshot, I kind of like file it and then go on with my relationship from a non-numerology place. So I don't know that I'm that conscious about how numerology is impacting the ways I relate with people. And I think any improvements in my relationships, whether they're business or personal, that's happened, came more from me, from my own personal evolution than from the numerology itself.
Hmm.
But that personal evolution was influenced by numerology. But I don't know, like, I don't know that I use um, the compatibility angles or that I'm very analytical about, oh my god, I need to hire a 5 person for this job, or like this is why we're fighting because they're a 9. I don't think that way. But I do look at the charts. I just don't know where that information goes in my subconscious, or how it influences the way I behave. Maybe it does. I don't know.
What about with dating?
I never say I never choose. I never say I'm not going to date this person because they're X, Y, or Z. And I think that's really, really stupid, and it should not be done with astrology either because that's not how it works.
I love that
So
you're
I
saying that.
don't like that. I look at the charts, but it's more from an angle of like, oh, this is why we have so much chemistry, not from the angle of, oh, yes, this is my soulmate. Like I'm like, this is it, because you don't see soulmate in a numerology chart either. It's the numerology chart is not giving you your destiny. It's just giving you kind of like a, it's kind of like a blood test. Like
Hmm.
here's the ingredients, and then it's cool information to reflect on, but it's not giving you the answer. So I don't decide who to date based on that. I look at the charts and it's filed somewhere in my subconscious. I don't know where, but I do kind of like, it does help me get a picture of somebody. Like, oh, and then
And I bet you subconsciously, you don't realize it. I bet you it helps you relate to them. So, like things that
maybe,
might have annoyed you, you might understand where it's coming from and it might not annoy you as much because, sometimes when we have a bigger picture of something, we're like, oh, well, that's just because of blank versus like, what the fuck is that happening?
yeah,
So you could subconsciously be able to just relate or, also see in them strengths that sometimes I think that's the biggest problem in relationships. You're like, they don't see me. They don't get what I'm good at. They don't, you know, Speaking of which, I want to go back to you said one of the things you learned from your own numerology was the things you deemed as weaknesses that you didn't
hmm
love about yourself. They were coming up in your chart saying these are positives and you finally
hmm
embraced them. What were those?
um, being disorganized, being instinctive, being risk loving, um, enamored with change, new things, um, being like really good with words because it's in my chart and there was evidence of it my whole life, but maybe I didn't see it as like that's my thing. And to see it confirmed, I was like, yeah, of course it's always been. Now I'm not going to question it again. That I think that conviction and that confidence, that external confirmation can give you, can stay with you for life, and that's really powerful, especially if there's evidence of it. Uh, but we're talking about weaknesses.
Well, what you deemed as weaknesses.
What I deemed as weaknesses. It was all about pleasure seeking, risk taking, disorganized, very instinctive, never planning, never having a schedule, never having a to do list, and just kind of like moving by what I want to do in the moment. That was always me. And to see it as like, this is who you are, and there's some people like that, and that's not a wrong
Mm.
thing. It's just some people are like that, and just embrace it, and that's how you are supposed to rule your life. I do that now, and yes, I do. I mean, I'm not always perfect at anything. I make a lot of mistakes, but running my company, for example, when I've had people either insert themselves into coaching roles or an actual consulting coaching role say like, just organize your day and make your list. I'm like, no, I'm okay with not doing that. That's not how I'm going to operate. I could get better in other ways, but that's just not a software that goes in my operating system, and that's
Well,
okay.
talk about that because
Yeah.
I'm sure there's so many people out here who have similar traits,
Uh-huh.
and are like, "But I wanna run a company or start something." They've probably really steered away from it because it's interesting as you say those things, those are usually qualities that one wouldn't be like, "Oh, you have these qualities, you should be an entrepreneur, you should
Mhm.
run this." So I love that it's actually now become part of your fuel. So can you talk about how you make it work for you in a business?
Other than knowing I can build a business being this way, I don't know that there's anything else. Because if you accept the story that this is going to be limiting when you run a business, then you make it real. But if you know that no, I can build a business being myself, so that internal limitation doesn't exist, it comes through somehow. I cannot explain how it has. Like even from the last week
That's a
of
$50 million bottle right there. You're
I
gonna have to
don't
figure it
know.
out.
I like it's happening. It's happening, and anybody who works with me can tell you like I am not an organized person, but the shit gets done somehow, and it just happens. And it's just I don't know.
Do people who
Yeah.
work with you, do they have to adjust how they like, if you're kind of a disorganized leader, how does
Hmm.
that work as it trickles down?
Not always in a good way or in an optimized way, but
I love how honest you are.
I'm very clear with staff in saying if you can't do something without me responding, you send me a million emails, you become very annoying in my DMs, you bug me until I respond, and don't think that if I'm ignoring you on purpose. I'm just probably distracted on something else. Just bug me, and I kind of uh, I'm kind of always clear, like, you manage me. Like, you tell me what to do so that you can do what you're supposed to do, and tell me
Like, am
when to show up. Give me the task. You are my manager. I'm not your manager. This is
I might
the
be you.
objective, but like, um, I kind of try to make it that way. And sometimes they can't get through to me for days, and I need to get better at that. So I'm not kind of like um, uh, making excuses for my weaknesses and putting them on them. Like you didn't chase me, but I do. Like I try to make staff comfortable with bugging me, with sending me tasks, with taking care of things on their own, and with being like managing me,
You've
so that
created a
they can get their work
system
done.
that yeah, you've created systems that by the way, I'm the same way. That's the thing I used to tell everyone. I'm like, "No, no, feel free to send me a million emails. I never get upset. I'd rather have a million emails because chances are I see it and I'm like, "Oh, yeah, yeah, I'll do that." And then it
Hmm.
gets pushed
Hmm.
down so far because there's so many
Hmm.
emails coming in.
Oh God, yeah.
Right, you get it. I was like, "So just keep send don't like, I
Hmm.
never am like, "I got it," like, which
Yeah.
I know some personalities are. I'm like, "So that's not my personality, same thing. Keep throwing it. I will get it. Call me, bother me. I appreciate that." And,
Hmm.
and I say same thing. I'm like, "Manage me. Don't worry about it." I don't dislike that because and I get for
Hmm.
other people, it's like, "Do not manage me. I've got myself managed. I'm fine." But I'm the same way. I'm like, "No, manage me. When you have something important that you need, I'm happy to give you the answer. It's just sometimes it's coming at a time I'm, like you said, distracted or it goes down and then I forget because there's a million other things that have come up."
Yeah.
So I get that.
Yeah.
That's funny.
And there's a compatibility side too there because there's people who love that kind of setup and there's people who don't like that. And if
Yes.
you don't like that, it's totally fine. But then we're not compatible because this is probably how this company is going to operate. Where like A, we're managing up, and B, um,
There's freedom going down.
there's freedom going down, and there's a level of chaos that's a
You have to
part
be
of the
comfortable with it.
culture and just also part of the nature of a young company because a young company never has all its ducks in a row. It never can. And some people get really frustrated with that, and that's okay. That's a personality type. It's not bad, but then maybe a startup is not the best place for you because a larger company will have all that order that you need to thrive, and that's okay too. So
No, but I love this, and I think it's important because I do think there are people who feel like you have to have a certain personality type to do a certain thing. So I think
mhm.
this is an important conversation. My question for you, totally random and different, how many people get in touch with you doing like numerology over their houses? Like if they're going to move into something new?
Um, Definitely a lot of friends and like people in my life. Users, not so much, but people in my life will call me about that stuff. And I have a very defined boundary between spirituality and superstition, and I don't like doing superstitious stuff. So like, help me choose the registration date for my business so that it's successful. That's superstition,
Mm-hmm.
and I don't like answering those questions. I say like, just register the business. I'll get you a
Right.
chart. Don't worry about it. Or like, should I rent the house that's 531 or 11 days? Just the house that you like, and then I'll tell you about those numbers. But I don't want you
Right.
to try to engineer things with numerology, especially
Right. It's you
the
pick
ones.
something for a reason, then let's figure out what that reason's
Exactly.
for. I
Exactly.
like that.
And the ones I never answer is about baby names. And some friends ask me about that, and I'm like,
Oh.
just channel the name. When you have the name, I'll give you the chart, but I'm not gonna help you engineer your baby's name through numerology, because there's a reason why we all got the perfect name. It's because nobody was using numerology when they were naming their baby. And I am very against that. With
Well, a
businesses,
lot of people.
I see kind of like the point in kind of like choosing name with numerology, but again, not from a this will make it successful mindset, but from a I want to get the right vibration for it mindset.
Hmm.
So that's the
People do
difference
that
between
with
spirituality and superstition.
astrology and birth,
Hmm.
because now there's a lot of planned C-sections, so you can kind of plan
Yeah,
the date and time. And I feel like a lot of people do that with astrology. They're like, hey, this is like the week we might have a kid, when should I do it? It's interesting. It's very
that's, I
different.
believe, superstition. Because
Hmm.
if you believe that the universe is perfect and has perfect timing, then you don't need to do that. If you're feeling that desire to control the outcome so that you get what you want from the universe, from your life, that's not spirituality. That's maybe an anxiety that something bad will happen that you're trying to prevent through that overbearing decision making. So there's, again, I'm not saying everybody who does this is superstitious, but that line is there, and you have to be careful with not crossing it. Or like, careful is like, oh, I'm not going to do this because it's the next month, or I'm not going to, like, don't make don't outsource all of your decisions to a divine language. Use it as a friend who's giving you advice, where you take some of the advice, you don't take some of the advice, but you're still driving your life.
I love that.
Because there's a difference between spirituality and superstition, and all these systems are both used and promoted and sold by people who are immensely superstitious and use it from that vibration, and I don't
Mm,
believe that to be spirituality.
mm. It's so funny you say that, because I love doing like numerology of houses, and I'm not great.
Hmm.
I don't even know if I'm doing it right, but like the basic thing.
Hmm.
And it was funny, like there was a period of time we were about to buy a place, and every place that came up that we either made an offer on and it didn't happen for whatever reason, whether we pulled out or it didn't happen, every single one, and it was interesting because this has never come up in my life before, it was a
Hmm.
9.
Hmm.
And so I was like, oh, clearly that's what we're attracting right now. Clearly that's what we need. Like, you know what I mean? It just made
Yeah.
sense that, oh, we're in this period of our lives that, and it was funny. And I find whenever I kind of go backwards and I look at a time we're looking for something, almost always the houses we're looking at come up as the same number. So it is
There's
like
a
that's the vibration that's
Yeah,
being attracted.
yeah. From the literal sense, that the dress in your house is telling you about the vibration of the home itself, and what you feel when you're inside it. And you can't get it wrong. So there is no house that gives you a bad vibe or a bad that superstition. But the way I've reflected on it over time is like, I never choose an apartment with numerology, but to reflect after the fact, like, oh, I ended up in a 104, totally makes sense in relation to what I was going through when I was
Hmm.
living there, and what I was focused on, and the kinds of things that happened to me, not just in the house, but in my life when I lived there. So it's like, I am in this 1-4 place, I end up in a 1-4 house, kind of like through
It's yeah,
attraction.
it's
Yeah,
it's super
yeah,
interesting,
yeah.
and you are super interesting. I could keep going on, but I know I've kept you for a while, and I really, really enjoy talking to you. And I'm so glad our audience actually gets a chance to, wrap their heads around numerology more. And please go to his website, Teledipity, because it's so awesome. And I get the forecasts, and they're so insightful, and it will start blowing your mind and kind of changing your relationship with self, which I love. And I
Thank
appreciate
you.
it. And hopefully we can have you back on and just do more stuff with the den, because you are awesome.
Thank you very much. It was an awesome chat. It was awesome to meet you. And
Same.
yeah, I had fun.
Me too.
Happy to be back
And
anytime.
oh, great. And you guys stay tuned because he is going to offer up his personal practice right after this. So thank you. So now Andrew is going to lead us in his personal practice, which is a way to unblock fears around creativity.
There's a little voice that we all hear inside our minds. Sometimes we don't realize that we're hearing it, but we're always hearing it. Whose job it is to judge everything that we're doing in relation to how it will be perceived by others, how others will judge it, praise it, criticize it, think about it. It's kind of like a little compass that keeps us in line with society out of the fear of not belonging or not being expelled from it in some way. And that voice is the most destructive thing for a creator. A creator is not just an artist. A creator can be an entrepreneur, because bringing an organization into the world is exactly like bringing a piece of art into the world. It's creating something from an instinct, an idea that wasn't there before. And when you get an instinct or an idea, what you're doing is you're tapping into some vibration that's not in the physical plane, that's trying to enter the world through you. Kind of like when a baby chooses to enter the world and picks its parents. When an idea chooses to enter the world, it picks its parent. And when you connect to these visions of something great that you want to create, you're getting chosen by an idea that is trusting you. It knows you. It knows your talents. It knows who you are, what your story is, and why you're just going to be the best parent for it. It's asking you to bring it into the world. And that's what I call channeling. And channeling gets muffled, blocked, contaminated by this little voice that's more focused on your identity, who you are in the world, and how you're perceived by the world, than the idea that you are here to bring out. So my daily practice for teaching myself how to ignore that little voice is that in the mornings, I go to a park near my house and I put on my favorite music in my headphones and I dance while I know other people are watching me. And when you do that, that little voice becomes really loud. Are they judging me? Like, sometimes people stare. And sometimes you can see that you are being judged. But if you teach yourself to still do the thing, despite all the things that your little voice is saying, despite all the fears that are coming up, despite all the insecurities that are coming up, and despite that fear of looking stupid or being stupid, and you just teach yourself to keep going, despite hearing that voice, what you're really doing is exercising the muscle of channeling, the muscle of um, getting those instincts and putting them out into the world without a filter, and without any thought of your identity or how you're seen by others. So the more you do it daily, or at least that's been my experience, the more I've been able to write what I actually want to write, create what I actually want to create, put this software into place and out into the world in the way that it wanted to come through, outside of my own insecurities and traumas. And I think I know it all came from that daily practice of dancing in public. And I also know that it's not for everybody. And you might find it so terrifying that you're not even going to try it. But then ask yourself, isn't that fear of not doing that, of not actually going and dancing in public, is it possible that it's present in other areas of your life when you are trying to write a blog, when you are trying to create a platform? Don't you think that fear is there too? And don't you think that that's something you would benefit from confronting? And isn't this a really fun way to confront it? Because if you don't want to dance in public, I totally respect that. I think there's many other ways to confront that voice, but I'm here to tell you that that voice needs to be confronted for you to follow your life mission, and that you could figure out another exercise to do it. But that fear that you feel when you say, I'm not doing that, that's stupid, why dance in public, is the same fear that's stopping you from many other things you don't even realize. So hopefully you've noticed it now and you can come up with your own idea for working on it every day.